or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Marge Lauber, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the current issues of the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the first issue we're reading from is April 1st, April Fool's Day, but some of these are not foolish. The gas prices keep on rising. They eclipsed at $4 a gallon in some places, averaged $3.88 in Niagara. That was on Tuesday. Well, that was March 31st. But now I just got gas and they were $4.19 a gallon. So the U.S. gas prices jumped past an average of $4 a gallon for the first time since 2022 on Tuesday, as the Iran war continues to push fuel prices higher worldwide. According to AAA, the national average for a gallon of regular gasoline is now $4.02, so that was on the 1st. Over $1 more expensive than it was before the war began on February 28th. That's the largest monthly jump the Motor Club has seen on record, and the last time U.S. drivers were collectively paying this much at the pump was nearly 4 years ago following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The price is a national average, meaning drivers in some states have been paying well over $4 a gallon for a while. Prices vary between states due to factors ranging from nearby supply to differing tax rates. And here in New York, I think we have one of the highest tax rates. As of Tuesday, the average price for a gallon of regular unleaded gas in Niagara County was $3.88 to $3.89, according to data from AAA. Now, that was on the 1st. And like I said, I got gas, I think yesterday, it was $4.19 a gallon. So it went up quite a bit just within a few days. We have some court briefs here in this issue. An Albion man was sentenced to 12 years in prison on a child pornography charge spurred by a search at an airport. Norman Kelly, 69, of Albion, who had been convicted of receipt of child pornography, was sentenced to serve 144 months in prison by the U.S. District Judge Lawrence Velardo on Monday. Assistant U.S. Attorney Maeve Higgins, who handled the case, stated that on October 20th, 23, Kelly arrived at the port of Detroit Metropolitan Airport in Romulus, Michigan, on a flight from Incheon, South Korea. And during an inspection of his baggage, Kelly removed a cellular phone from his pocket and had a computer bag, which contained a laptop computer and 4 USB thumb drives. Due to lack of eye contact during questioning, inconsistencies in his travel story, and nervous behavior, the devices were authorized to be examined. A Customs and Border Protection officer examined the cell phone, laptop, and one of the thumb drives, and discovered what appeared to be suspected child pornography. Subsequent investigation determined that between March 12th and September 20th, 23, Kelly used his laptop computer to entice minors to engage in sexually explicit behavior for the purpose of producing images which he could receive via the internet. Scumball. Anyway, next one, a Buffalo man sentenced for killing a co-worker. A Buffalo man was sentenced to 22 years in prison after pleading guilty to killing a co-worker at a shop in Buffalo's Broadway and Fillmore neighborhood. Abdullah Hussein, 27, in Buffalo, was sentenced Tuesday before Erie County Court Judge Susan Egan, and he received a determinate sentence of 22 years in prison, followed by 5 years of pro-release supervision. So on February 21st, 23, Buffalo police officers responded to a reported shooting at a corner store located on Broadway near Sears Street, and officials found the victim, a 62-year-old Tafak al-Assari, dead inside the store. Hussein, who was an employee of the store, shot his co-worker, and he was apprehended by police a short time later. Wow. In this episode, we also have some comics. We have Frank and Ernest, and there's two guys sitting on a rock, and we hear a whack, and the guy goes, ow! So somebody obviously hit somebody. And two guys up on the rock said, I see Bodie got another with the old, what is the sound of one hand clapping trick? So he hit the guy. And then an overboard, because it's April Fool's Day, mind you, these guys are rushing with plants to go inside because it's hailing out and raining out. One says, help me get these little plants back inside. Help me get these little plants back inside. And he takes them inside. And it's April Fool's because it was raining outside and they're taking the plants inside where the plants need rain, I guess. And in Drabble, this woman comes to, this is the guy that owns that dog. So this woman comes to the store and she goes, Happy April Fool's Day. And he goes, Wendy. And she says, Norman, I must admit, when I first met you, I thought you were a fool. And he's got the cake in his hand. And he said, I was hoping there would be more to that story. Of course. Let's see, who else do we have? We have Tiger. Tiger has a baseball cap on, and he's always playing baseball. So Tiger and his friend is playing the violin. And Tiger says, what's the name of that piece you just played? And he said, Humoresque. Why are you writing it down? And Tiger says, I'm making a list of songs I don't ever want to hear again. Now let's move on to the issue of Thursday, April 2nd, and see what's going on. So Artemis 2, the spaceship, went going to the moon. I guess it went around the backside of the moon, so this is news, but they did cast off on April 2nd, Thursday, and they're supposed to fly around the moon and then come back, but they're not landing there right now. So there's that refugee's death in Buffalo. It's ruled a homicide. The man that was is a refugee and he was blind, and they dropped him off at a McDonald's or Tim Hortons, and the Tim Hortons was closed. I guess he wandered around and they found him and he was deceased. So the death of a nearly blind refugee from Myanmar who was found on Buffalo Street in February, 5 days after Border Patrol agents left him at a donut shop, has been ruled a homicide. The Erie County Medical Examiner's Office didn't reach any conclusions about responsibility for Nuru Ahmed Shah Alam's death, while which the agency said was caused by complications of a perforated duodenum ulcer precipitated by hypothermia and dehydration. Ruling the death a homicide means it's resulted from another person's actions or inaction, which doesn't necessarily mean that a crime was committed. This should not have happened, Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz, a Democrat, said at a news conference Wednesday. Asked whether the Border Patrol was responsible for his death, he declined to comment and said any such determination will be up to law enforcement agencies. There is a trail dispute. The town of Newfane suing a property owner to secure permanent, unfettered public access to the Burt Dam fishing area from Fisherman's Park. The town filed suit against Susan Collins, the owner of 1897 West Creek Road, on March 20th, petitioning state Supreme Court to grant an easement for the portions of Collins' property that is part of the pedestrian access path along the east side of 18 Mile Creek between the dam and the park. Both are town-owned and maintained properties. The lawsuit is in response to Collins and or her representatives posting no trespassing signs along the section of the footpath that crosses her property last fall. The town asserts that action effectively blocked public access to the Burt Dam fishing area at the height of the approximately 5-week fall fishing season, a peak period of annual tourism and economic activity in the town of Newfane. The past closure diminished visitor traffic, reduced revenues to local businesses, and undermined the goodwill and reputation that the town and its residents have cultivated over decades through the management and promotion of Fisherman's Park and the Burt Dam fishing area. The town is seeking a judgment declaring that it holds a prospective easement and or an easement by necessity on the portion of the access path that crosses Collins' property. Okay, let's go on to the April 3rd issue. So, 3 farms win the funding for climate resilient projects. The 3 farms in eastern Niagara County will receive more than $1 million in State Department of Agriculture funds for projects that combat climate warming. Through the Niagara County Soil and Water Conservative District, the 3 farms, Chaffee Farms in Barker, McBee's Farm in Gasport, and Treetop Acres in Cambria, will receive shares of $1.1 million awarded from the state's Climate Resilient Farming Grant Program. Once again, the agricultural producers across the state are showing that when the resources are available, they will do their part to address climate change and protect our soil and water, says Matthew Brower, State Soil and Water Conservation Committee Chair. The growth in the Climate Resilient Farming Grants program has been amazing, both in terms of funding and the number of projected awards, thanks to the local soil and water conservation districts for making this a success. So McBee's Farm was granted $53,800 to support Vintner Singer orchards in adopting sheep grazing as a land management system during the 4 to 5 year period before orchards are replanted. McBee's raises hair sheep. It's super awesome. We're really excited, McBee's operator Chris McCarthy said. There are spots at Vintner Singer orchards taking out rows of apples and peaches. We're gazing those plots. Some of them are tiny plots that with modern technology and modern growing practices, you now don't have to mow. So Mark Cedar, district engineer for the Niagara County Soil and Water Conservation District, said the grant funding will be used for fencing, extending water access for livestock, a mobile shelter, and pasture seed for more drought-tolerant grasses and alfalfa. McBee's project will replace diesel-powered mowing and brush hogging with managed grazing to maintain productive ground cover, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and fuel use, and return nutrients or organic matter to the soil through manure, strengthening environment resilience, according to press release. The project is expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. So Cedar said the Chaffee Farm dairy operation was granted $867,000 to install manure storage cover and capture systems for methane emissions reduction. Methane is produced when livestock manure is left to decompose in storage bins. Sider said methane is 70 times more powerful than carbon dioxide in terms of global heating. Chaffee Farms will install a flexible cover over an existing 5-acre waste liquid manure storage facility to improve nutrient management. The cover and flare system will be installed to collect and destroy the methane generated from manure. And more about the gas. The gas stations don't have much control over the fuel prices. In Des Moines, Iowa, the nearly daily changes in U.S. gas prices are dizzying for drivers who are left feeling frustrated and cash-strapped by the highest fuel costs since 2022. With the Iran war pushing up prices worldwide, the U.S. average for a gallon of gas topped $4 on Tuesday. The uncertainty at the pump is trickling down from a massive volatile oil and gas market is making it hard for gas stations to keep up. Oil prices soared when U.S. markets opened Thursday following President Donald Trump's speech Wednesday promising to hit Iran extremely hard in the coming weeks. He asked Americans for patience. U.S. drivers have spent the past month gaming out when to fill up or hunting for deals at gas prices can change from one day to the next or from one nearby station to another. And I've seen that. I've seen some gas stations be cheaper than others. I think there's a place online that they have an app where you could find where the cheapest gas prices are. And then false lawmakers sound off on flavored tobacco products Wednesday. In Niagara Falls, in recognition of the Takedown Tobacco National Day of Action, which was April 1st, and Minority Health Month, City Council members issued a public declaration calling for the elimination of flavored tobacco products, including menthol cigarettes, within the city. City leaders said the effort targets persistent health disparities driven by the tobacco industry's long-standing marketing in communities of color and low-income housing neighborhoods. In Niagara County, about 1 in 5 adults smokes, a rate that's well above the state average. Public health experts point to menthol products as a key driver of the disparity. Addressing the disproportionate impact of methanol and flavored tobacco is essential to advancing health equity in Niagara Falls. The declaration follows a recent briefing by Dr. Phil Garner of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, highlighting how targeted marketing has contributed to higher rates of tobacco use, disease, and death in African American communities. Love Canal taught us that when a community faces serious harm, leaders must act, said Councilman Bridget Miles. Flavored tobacco and menthol cigarettes are a modern public health threat, disproportionate, impacting black and brown residents. Niagara County Legislator Jeff Elder said, "This is not just a public health issue, it's a matter of justice. Our young people deserve to grow up free from predatory marketing, and we must act now to protect further generations." We're listening to a reading of articles and features for the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. All right, for the next issues we're going to read is from Saturday and Sunday, April 4th and 5th. So, Big Willie's is to carry I Love Lockport merchandise. Community members and tourists will be able to keep Lockport close to their heart in the coming months when Big Willie's starts carrying I Love Lockport merchandise. The store at 2 Main Street features NFL jerseys, hoodies, sweatsuits, and snapback hats. I can't believe nobody sells t-shirts and hoodies for the canal with all the trouble coming in through here, owner William T. Johnson said. When it was mentioned to me, I thought, I'm sitting right here. Why not try it out? I'm going to start with this summer. So Vicki Smith, president and CEO of Greater Lockport Development Corporation, told the Common Council earlier this week that Johnson received a micro enterprise grant of $25,000 to help him expand his business into the new product line. The grants are offered to applicants that have operated a brick-and-mortar business within the city and have 5 or fewer employees. Businesses need to match 10% of the grant amount and must hire 1 full-time or 2 part-time employees, which can include the owner. Businesses can use the grant money for equipment purchases, merchandising, furnishings, and inventory purchases, working capital, employee training expenses, professional financing fees, and marketing expenses. Johnson said he is finishing his orders of I Love Lockport clothing and is looking at adding drinkware. Oh. There also is a haunted house. Did you know this? Opening downtown. The owner of the former Seven Gates Screen Park in Wheatfield is creating a new haunted horror attraction in Lockport. Dakota Ward purchased 33 Pine Street, formerly the location of Sylvia's School of Dance, last summer. Ward said work is underway to convert the 3-floor building into a haunted house attraction with escape rooms incorporated into the tour. Like the Seven Gates Screen Park, Ward said the new attraction will feature a 20-minute journey through scenery that includes spooky actors, animatronics, and special lighting effects. Patrons will buy a ticket at the door, and then they could go through the haunted house. Well, so there's also an article about helping immigrants find their voice. So arriving in a new country can be difficult for anyone, but starting a new life where you cannot understand the main language can be difficult without help. With its language access program already successful in Rochester, the Ibero-American Action League is looking to expand the program to Western New York. Plans call for its local branch, the Ebro Business Center, Western New York, based out at 6951 Williams Road in Niagara Falls, to start hosting translators who can help immigrants and deaf people navigate the various services needed for American life. When we remove language barriers, we empower individuals to advocate for themselves, strengthen families and community resilience, and create more equitable systems overall, said Julio Jordan, the League's Director of Diversity, Equity, Justice, and Inclusion. Such interpreters can help non-English speakers navigate their way through financial and medical issues and better participate in civic matters. The program also helps companies comply with the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin in programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance. Ibero-American Action League plans on starting with Spanish translators and sign language interpreters, potentially expanding to accommodate more languages, especially those spoken by Niagara Falls' prominent South Asian community. In other news, there's a Love Canal activist, he was author, to discuss environmental reckoning. So Keith O'Brien and former resident Llewellyn Kenny take part on April 16th. To hear of Love Canal today is to be reminded of the environmental disaster that began unfolding on the east side of Niagara Falls roughly 50 years ago. The planned community was in fact a betrayal of its idyllic sounding name when it became clear that the neighborhood, which included an elementary school, had been knowingly built on top of a massive toxic waste dump containing more than 20,000 tons of waste that included deadly carcinogens. Llewellyn Kenny, a mother and research scientist, was among the thousands of Love Canal residents affected by the tragedy. She became part of the small group of displaced residents turned activists who worked tirelessly to confront the stonewalling cover-up and injustice of Love Canal. Their efforts were responsible for spearheading major changes to environmental policies, including creating the Superfund program. Kenny's story is essential to Keith O'Brien's acclaimed book, Paradise Falls, the true story of an environmental catastrophe. She'll join the author on April 16th for a spring keynote in Capon Hall on the University of Buffalo North Campus, presented as part of the ongoing exhibit Toxic Archives, Voices from Love Canal. A poignantly curated collection of photographs, correspondence, and first-hand accounts of the crisis, organized by University Archives. And then for local news, let's move on. Hochul loses ground to Blakeman in latest Siena poll. So Bruce B. Blakeman, the Republican candidate for governor, gained some ground against his incumbent opponent in the latest statewide poll of voters, but a majority of voters still say they don't know who he is. According to the latest Sierra Research Institute poll, released on Tuesday, Hochul now leads Blakeman by 13 percentage points, down from her 20-point lead over the Nassau County executive recorded in February. Hochul's favorability rating remains largely unchanged, with 45% of people reporting a favorable view for overall to 42% with a negative view. Her job approval rating is just above water at 52% positive and 40% negative. Meanwhile, Blakeman's favorability sits at 18% positive and 80% negative, with 64% of voters unfamiliar with him or without enough information to form an opinion. So interestingly, Hochul's standing with New Yorkers essentially the same as last month. A small plural views her favorably, and a small majority approves of the job she's doing as governor, as is Blakeman's. Yet, the race between the two has tightened a little. 3/4 of Democrats continue to support Hochul, and more than 3/4 of Republicans continue to support Blakeman. Now, independents favor Blakeman by 7 points after siding with Hochul by 5 points. So, It should be interesting to find out who's going to win. And then, another news. Denapolis terrorist impact hit hard along Canadian border. So federal policies have had a big impact on tourism in New York, particularly in Canadian border communities, according to a report released on Tuesday by State Controller Thomas DiNapoli's office. An analysis released by DiNapoli shows the state had the second steepest decline in international tourism in the country, second only to California. The analysis showed the number of overseas travelers coming to New York in 2025 declined by 3%, a loss of more than 176,000 visitors. New York's economy has been hit hard as a result, according to DiNapoli's office, which found fewer visitors equated to less spending and a smaller number of jobs in hotels and restaurants. DiNapoli said the impact was most acute for areas near the U.S.-Canada border, where travel from Canada fell by more than 21%, a decrease of nearly 3.6 million visitors. Exports to Canada also declined by 3.8 billion, which DiNapoli attributed to higher tariffs imposed by President Trump's administration. Federal policies are driving foreign travelers away and taking billions in tourism spending and harming our government, as exports substantially declined, DiNapoli said. That loss of revenue means fewer jobs in New York and tougher times for those working in the tourism industry. We've already seen the consequences, especially in hotels and restaurants in these regions near the Canadian border. New York is a top destination for tourists to the U.S., and policies that welcome and encourage international travel are needed to avoid damaging economic consequences. Well, how true that is. So in other news, the Trump budget seeks $1.5 trillion for defense. In Washington, President Donald Trump has proposed boosting defense spending to $1.5 trillion in his 2027 budget released Friday, the largest such request in decades, reflecting his emphasis on U.S. military investments over domestic programs. The sizable increase for the Pentagon, some 44%, has been telegraphed by the Republican president even before the U.S. led war against Iran. The president's plan would also reduce spending on non-defensive programs by 10%. President Trump promised to reinvest in America's national security infrastructure to make sure our nation is safe in a dangerous world. The president's annual budget is considered a reflection of the administration's values and does not carry the force of law. The massive domestically typically highlights an administration's priorities, but Congress, which handles federal spending issues, is free to reject it and often does. This year's White House document is intended to provide a roadmap from the president to Congress as lawmakers build their own budgets, an annual appropriations bill to keep the government funded. Val spoke to House GOP lawmakers on a private call Thursday. Trump speaking ahead of his address to the nation this week about the Iran war, seeing the military as his priority, setting up a clash ahead in Congress. We're fighting wars. We can't take care of daycare, Trump said at a private White House event Wednesday. It's not possible for us to take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare, all these things, individual things, he said. They can do it on a state basis, but you can't do it on a federal. Among the priorities the White House called for supporting the Trump administration's immigration enforcement and deportation operations by eliminating aspects of a refugee resettlement and program, maintaining immigration and customs enforcement funds at current year levels, and drawing on last year's levels, increases for the Department of Homeland Security funding to continue opening detention facilities, including 100,000 beds for adults and 30,000 for families, a 13% increase in funding for the Department of Justice to focus on violent criminals and the president's promise to stop what the White House calls migrant crime, a $10 billion fund within the nation's Park Service for construction and beautification projects in Washington, D.C., a $481 million increase in funding to enhance aviation, safety and support air traffic controller hiring surge. Then he wants to cancel more than $15 billion from the Biden-era bipartisan infrastructure law, including funds for renewable energy projects and cuts to the National Oceans and Atmospheric Association, or NOAA, grants. 19% cut in the Department of Agriculture and in certain university grants, a 13% cut for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and about a 12% decrease to the Health and Human Services Department, including cuts to low-income heating assistance programs. The White House has touted cuts of what it calls woke programs that often direct federal investments toward low-income communities. The budget used the word woke 34 times. So he wants the states to pay for more of this stuff rather than the federal government, which, of course, how is the state going to pay for it? They're going to have to raise their taxes. Makes sense. So let's leave Trump alone here and see what else is going on. The United Airlines bumps up their bag fee, citing the jet fuel costs. Of course, the prices of gas go up, and the fuel goes up. They got to make money somewhere, so they're upping their prices. Okay, so the cost of these bags now, most travelers flying with United Airlines will now pay $10 more to check their luggage in. Customers traveling in the United States, Mexico, Canada, and Latin America will pay $45 for the first piece of luggage and $55 for their second bag. That's a lot of money. That's $95 if you have 2 bags of luggage plus the plane fare. So this is the first time in 2 years the airline has raised bag fees. Some passengers will still receive a free first checked bag, including co-branded credit card holders, a company-branded credit card holders, certain loyalty tier members, active military personnel, and travelers in premium cabins. So the rest of us poor people got to pay the $45. Customers who check bags less than 24 hours before departure will pay an additional $5. Wow! So you're going to be paying like $100 to check your bags in at the airport. It's kind of crazy. I always take a carry-on bag, and that way I don't have to stuff everything I can in there, and that way I don't have to pay for baggage. That might be a good idea. So you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. So unretired seniors are picking up gig work. I'm in Plainville, New York. Before Stu Goldberg begins his night shift driving for Uber, he pulls out a notebook to read a handwritten list of reminders. No tickets, full stops. He scrawled in the book, carefully backing up, watching for pedestrians and bikes. With a PhD in neuropsychology and decades of experience in running his own business, Goldberg, 74, didn't picture chauffeuring strangers around when he retired. But financially, things didn't go as planned. So he makes the best of his situation, shuttling passengers through New York City at night. I like the freedom. I like the flexibility. I like meeting people, Goldberg said. I like that most of the time I can get, 1 or twice a day, a good conversation with somebody. Goldberg is one of a growing number of Americans who have unretired in recent years after concluding decades-long careers at hospitals, universities, and corporations. They returned to the workforce due to insufficient retirement savings, rising living costs, and a desire to stay active. Some are finding gig work or contract jobs through apps or digital platforms. Delivering people and parcels, taking care of pets, or folding other people's laundry suits them because they can set their own hours and work or not when they choose. We're living longer, so people are working longer because they have to fund those extra years, said Carly Rozowski, Vice President of Financial Resilience at the nonprofit organization ARP. And this concept of retirement for most people is like a cliff or a day they're working towards really isn't a reality for most. Goldberg wanted to teach after winding down his software and telemarketing company, but he needed to earn more money than what the occasional adjunct professor job teaching situation and statistics would pay. So Uber came up, and it was not a bad choice for me because I was comfortable driving people, he said. I felt it could be a good way to make money and keep most of it. About 1 in 5 Americans over age 50 who are not retired say they have no retirement savings, according to a survey that the ARP conducted in January 25. Retirees and employment experts say gig work has advantages and downsides, including limited job protections and wages that may be insufficient to cover on-the-job expenses that can't be written off as tax deductions. Here's a few factors to consider. Barbara Beretta, 72, retired as a pediatric nurse. In 2018, she got restless after a few years and signed up with the pet care app Rover, which connected her jobs to walking dogs and using her nursing skills to administer medication to cats. The work keeps her active. She said, "I get my steps in and do hill climbing," she said. In a leafy New Jersey suburb, Beretta set out to coax Barley, a mixed pit bull, beagle, and shepherd, into the afternoon air with a wind-chilling temperature down in the 20s. "Barley, if you turn this way, the wind will be blowing behind you," she said gently, leading the dog down a wide street. Beretta likes the physical nature of dog walking. She ran 2 half marathons in the past year, but notices that being older and not having knees that are totally great makes steeper, uneven terrain a challenge, even for her. She advises people in her age group to be careful about which pets they agree to walk. "Some dogs are big and strong, which can be an issue. A lesson I learned very early on," Beretta said. "An 80-pound dog, they're going to pull and they're going to run away. Driving can be hard on the back and legs, and the challenge of finding restrooms to use on the go becomes difficult to deal with as you age," Goldberg cautioned. "Days can feel long and lonely after one retires. Working part-time can provide social interaction." Baruch Schwartz, 78, was a wedding photographer for decades until the work became too physically demanding to do full-time. He started driving for Uber and Lyft and derived satisfaction from feeling needed. "I feel like I'm on a mission," he said, after taking a passenger home from a kidney dialysis appointment. Driving for Uber gives Goldberg a chance to meet a variety of people, and one night he spoke with a Scottish historian about the movie Braveheart. Another time a passenger asked him how to know whether it was the right time to propose to his girlfriend. He said, "I'm amazed at what people will tell me about their relationships." So one of the draws of working for gig platforms is the ability to set your own hours. Beretta's schedule allows her to babysit her grandchildren. Goldberg appreciates the flexibility in setting his own hours when there was a recent death in his family. But between that unplanned trip and a root canal, and no vacation or sick days offered by his job, he went several days without income. When this happened, even though you have the flexibility which you like, and you don't have to call anybody and say, "I'm not driving today," you still don't make the money that day, and you're still paying insurance. A lot of people who are seniors, including myself, have gone back to work after they've retired. And the way prices are going up, and if you've been grocery shopping lately, the grocery stores' meat prices are out of this world. A lot of prices are going up on things that you haven't seen before besides gas. So a lot of people do have to go back to work, unfortunately. And there's a review. There's a precedent for just a month. On April 14th, 1841, 185 years ago, President William Harrison died of what was diagnosed at the time as pneumonia. The nation was shocked. This was the first time an American president had died in office. What was even worse, it happened only 31 days after he was sworn in. So William Harrison served as a major general in the Northwest Indian War and the War of 1812. He then, was a congressman for the Northwest Territory and governor of the Indiana Territory. In 1836, Harrison ran for office as president and was defeated by Martin Van Buren. But then the financial panic of 1837 eroded Van Buren's popularity, and Harrison ran again. So in 1840, and he defeated the sitting president. So at age 68, Harrison was the oldest man elected to the office. And Van Buren complained that Harrison does not have to realize the vast importance of his elevation. He is tickled with the presidency as a young woman is with a new bonnet. So Andrew Jackson referred to him as a president imbecile chief. So, by all accounts, Harrison wore himself out at his inauguration, even with his friend Daniel Webster helping out by trimming the length of his address. Harrison set a record for longest inaugural speech of 8,445 words. He spoke for 2 hours in wet, freezing weather. Wanting to appear vigorous, Harrison elected to wear neither a hat nor a heavy overcoat. And then it was an inaugural parade at 3 inaugural balls. So totally exhausted, Harrison finally retired upstairs to his bedroom. His wife, who was quite ill herself, hadn't yet made the trip to join him in Washington. So Harrison grew ill a few weeks later, suffering respiratory symptoms and pain in his abdomen. He was treated with opium, castor oil, wine, brandy, and Virginia snakeweed, none of which helped. Nor did the inevitable bloodletting with leeches that followed. On April 3rd, Harrison developed diarrhea and grew delirious. At one point, he mistook his doctor for Vice President John Tyler and said what would be his last words. "Sir, I wish you to understand the true principles of the government. I wish them carried out. I ask nothing more." So Harrison died shortly after midnight on April 4th, 1841, 9 days after falling ill, and 31 days after he had been sworn into the office. So what exactly killed him? Well, it is assumed that Harrison's decision to spend so much time outdoors without appropriate cover had led to his illness and death, but historians aren't so sure. In those days, the sewage of Washington, D.C. was dumped into a marsh along the shore of the Potomac River. 7 blocks downstream of this was the intake for the White House water supply. Oh, yuck. In 2014, researchers speculated that Harrison's severe gastroenteritis was more likely to be bacteria in his drinking water. His age and existing health issues just made it worse. A funeral procession and ceremony was hastily arranged, the difficulty being that so many government officials were out of town. So after a 30-day mourning period, Harrison's coffin was placed in a vault in the Congressional Cemetery that summer, and it would be hauled back out and shipped via train and river barge to his home in North Bend, Ohio. Wow. There are 7 other presidents who died in office too. Zachary Taylor in 1850. He was the Army captain in the War of 1812, a colonel in the Black Hawk War, major general in the Mexican-American War, and he took office in 1849. He served 492 days. He died of a severe case of gastroenteritis, and then the vice president was Millard Fillmore. But you know what? If Harrison died from that and Taylor died from that, maybe they should have fixed the water supply. So Abraham Lincoln, before he was president, he was a lawyer, 4-term Illinois state representative, and 1-term congressman from Illinois. So he took office in the 1860s, and of course we know he was assassinated while watching a state production at Ford's Theater, Washington, D.C., and his vice president was Andrew Johnson. And then there was James Garfield. And what he did, he was a lawyer from Ohio, a state senator, general in the Civil War, 4-term congressman from Ohio. He took office on March 4th, 1881, and he served for 199 days. 2 months after being shot by a disappointed office seeker at a Washington train station, he died. And his vice president was Chester Arthur. And then you had William McKinley. He was a Civil War soldier, a lawyer, a 7-term congressman from Ohio, and governor of Ohio. He took office on March 4th, 1897. And then he died after being shot while visiting the Pan American Exhibition in Buffalo, New York. And his vice president was Theodore Roosevelt. Then Warren G. Harding, he was a newspaper publisher before he was president, an Ohio state senator, lieutenant governor of Ohio, and U.S. senator from Ohio. And he took place in 1921, and he died of a heart attack in San Francisco while on a Voyage of Understanding tour of the West. His vice president was Calvin Coolidge. Then there was Franklin Roosevelt. And what he did before, he was a lawyer, a New York State senator, assistant secretary of the Navy, and governor of New York. And he took office March 4th, 1933, and he died of a cerebral hemorrhage while visiting Warm Springs, Georgia. His vice president was Harry Truman. Then there was John Kennedy, of course, PT boat skipper in World War II, three-term congressman and senator from Massachusetts. He took over in January 1961, and he was assassinated during a motorcade in Dallas, and then his vice president was Lyndon Johnson. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. So, our last issue is April 7th. So, mum's the word at OTB audit. The state controller's scathing audit of Western Regional Off-Track Betting Corporation has landed with a thud. Despite finding years of financial mismanagement, the comptroller is making no referrals to criminal investigations. Niagara County Republicans, who in September appointed former OTB boss Henry Wozzeski to the agency's board of directors, have nothing to say publicly about the damning report. Neither does leadership of the OTB board. Niagara County Democrats, meanwhile, are calling for accountability but hold only 4 of 15 seats on the county's legislature. The lack of follow-throughs had frustrated critics of OTB's and Wojciechowski's tenure. At present, Wojciechowski is poised to obtain a license from the State Gaming Commission that will allow him to be a voting member of the board. So, there's an additional vehicle fee imposed by the county. The Niagara County Legislature has voiced its unanimous disapproval of a new state proposal to charge drivers a new fee to help fund public transportation. Last month, the New York State Assembly introduced a proposal for a supplemental $25 vehicle registration fee that would help pay for public transportation services in upstate New York. Assemblymember William Conrad, whose district covers North Tonawanda as well as the city and town of Tonawanda, is one of the bill's co-sponsors. It results from a proposal that New York Public Transit Association President Miguel Velquez made to the legislature as the state budget comes together. The bill is currently going through committees. Let's call this what it is. It's a tax, said County Legislator Chris McKimmey during the March 24th legislative session. Families in Niagara County are already stretched thin. They're dealing with rising utility costs, higher grocery bills, and overall cost of living that keeps climbing. Every time we turn around, it feels like the government's asking for more. The county's resolution states that it is not appropriate for Albany to look to Niagara County drivers to subsidize transit funding, as the region is largely car-dependent for transportation, and mass transit is not an option for most residents. Not true. Another article calling all local citizen scientists. Frog listeners play a valuable role in monitoring the environment. Frogs calling outdoors is more than a romantic sound of spring. The chorus of neighborhood peepers is an important indicator of environmental health, and community members can help monitor the progress. So says John Randall, natural resource educator for Cornell Cooperative Extension of Niagara County, describing FrogWatch USA as a valuable online program that trains citizen residents to observe local frogs and toad species. These trained individuals listen to frogs and toads during evenings from February through August and submit their observation to a national online database. Nobody from our area seems to be doing this, Randall said. The idea is that frogs are especially really sensitive to changes in temperature, and that impacts their calling and ability to breed. Unexpected spring's high and low temperatures can decimate frogs' ability to spawn viable eggs, which Randall said are needed in thousands to beat the odds and grow into adults. They are the ones that are seeing these really small changes in the environment that create huge impacts, he said. There's so much depth along the way from egg to tadpole. Randall said a study released in 2006 found that 42% of all amphibian species globally were declining. What do we do without them frogs? So, in local news, the Castilian Art Museum of Niagara University will open 2 major spring exhibits on Thursday, Human Nature, Envisioning the Environment, and USA 250, celebrating the American vision. The opening receptions from 5 to 7, that should be today. Together, the exhibitions offer a timely and thought-provoking exploration of where we have been and where we are headed, inviting audience to consider the intertwined futures of humanity, the environment, and the evolving American story. Marketing and membership head Jess McCurry said through contemporary and historical works, the exhibition engaged themes of identity, responsibility, resilience, and imagination, asking visitors to reflect on the worlds we have shaped and the ones we are still creating. And we are. There's a bunch of articles called about In Good Taste. A study delves into olive oil's health beneficials. So, olive oil has long been touted for its ability to lower heart disease risk. So, University of Florida researchers set out to dig deep to learn how much olive oil is beneficial. Well, during the Recipe for Heart Health study, 40 participants at risk for cardiovascular disease were randomly assigned to consume either a low amount, less than a teaspoon, of extra virgin olive oil, or a high amount, 4 tablespoons, each day. After a 1-week washout period, the participants switched and followed the other olive oil regime for 4 weeks. Participants also adhered to whole food, plant-based, or vegan diets that were not low in fat. UF's researchers found that no matter the amount, consuming extra virgin olive oil decreased LDL, or the bad cholesterol, which has been linked to heart disease. They also learned that while consuming olive oil daily helps, other elements of someone's diet may play a more significant role in achieving health benefits. For example, people who consume low amounts of olive oil, but also limited foods such as red and processed meats, added sugars, and saturated fats, and ate plant-based fats such as avocados, nuts, seeds, and olives, had more significant reductions in LDL cholesterol than participants who just consumed high amounts of olive oil. So overall, the study's researchers concluded that where participants received their dietary fat from mattered, and that getting it from the whole plant-based fats was more beneficial for reducing cholesterol than getting it from olive oil alone. There you go. So there was an article here about turning your table scraps into gourmet meals. Carrot tops, potato peels, and bones quickly go from your cutting board to the trash bin, but no more. These just are a few ingredients at the center of the zero waste movement, promising to make meals delicious and substantial. Food waste continues to contribute to environmental issues. Chefs as home cooks are looking for creative ways to repurpose every part of their meal. Some fine dining restaurants like Rodora Wine Bar in New York and Lionfish in San Diego boast a zero-waste kitchen while guaranteeing an exceptional and unforgettable meal. Are you ready to turn your meal scraps into gourmet meals? Wow. Zero-waste cooking offers myriad benefits. By adopting this approach, you can maximize the value of your groceries, push yourself to experiment with new recipes, and contribute towards more substantial living. First, zero-waste cooking positively contributes to reducing food waste. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States, approximately 1/3 of food produced globally is wasted. This further contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and represents a loss of resources used in food production. So what they suggest you do for the zero-waste cooking, stockpile your scraps. Most likely than not, after cooking one meal, you won't have enough scraps to do anything substantial with. So this is why accumulating vegetable peels, ends, and other trimmings in a dedicated container in your freezer is essential to a zero-waste kitchen. This method ensures that you always have base ingredients for your soups and stocks and extends the shelf life of items that would normally go to waste. And then you can use a compost bin for non-edible waste. You can make a compost thing that you can put in your garden as fertilizer. You can get creative with your leftovers. You can use the vegetables and soups, and leftover grains can be repurposed in salads and stir fries. You can plan meals around what you have. So you can make all the kinds of different things. Huh. And for the vegetable peels and the ends are often discarded, but they are packed with nutrients and flavor that can be used to make a delicious vegetable broth or soups and sauces. Huh. There you go. So we have some cartoons here. Let's see what we have. There is Louie, and Louie's this dog. And there's all these other dogs sitting around, and they all got bowls in front of them. And Louie said, "Let's run around the dog park like we're crazy, catch our breath, and lap with some water." And they run around like we're crazy again. That was his event planner for dogs. Run around, drink some water, go back and run around again. And that's pretty much what they do. And Drabble's the guy that had that dog, but he doesn't have the dog today. So they're on a cruise. And his wife says, "Here's our cabin, Ralph." And he said, "This is going to be a long week." And she says, "What could be worse than being on the same cruise ship as Steinbauer?" That's what he's thinking. Steinbauer puts his head around the door and says, "Hey, keep it down over there." And he goes, "Oh no, he's in the room next to ours." Always the way. So we also have Tiger, that little boy that wears a cap. He always has his dog with him. And he's going by a toy store. There's this little girl's looking at a doll in a toy store. And she says, if you give that doll a bottle, she wets her diaper." He said, "Really? And that's the selling point?" That's too funny. Now, we have a section called Dear Ann, who is just like a Dear Abby. And it said, "Dear Annie, I'm wondering if I am the only one who feels this way, though I suspect I'm not. From the outside, my life looks full. I have family, friends, responsibilities, and a calendar that rarely seems empty. Yet, somehow, I often feel lonely right in the middle of it all. I spend so much time taking care of other people, showing up, remembering birthdays, checking in, and being the dependable one. But very rarely does anyone ask how I'm really doing. If I disappear for a week, I honestly wonder if they would even notice. It's a strange kind of sadness to be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. I'm not looking to be the center of attention, but I would like to feel that my presence matters for more than what I can do for everybody else. Lately, I have found myself pulling back, not because I want to lose these relationships, because it hurts to keep showing up and feeling invisible. How do you tell the people in your life that you feel overlooked without sounding needy or ungrateful? And how do you stop loneliness from settling in when your life looks like anything but lonely on paper? Invisible in plain sight. And Annie says, "Dear Invisible, plenty of people feel lonely in a crowded room. Being needed is not the same as being known. If you want people to stop treating you like dependable furniture, you must have to speak up and step back. Try telling the truth about the violin music. I miss feeling connected to you. The people who care will make more of an effort. The ones who only notice what you do for them may grumble, but that is useful information too. Real friendship is not built on convenience. It is built on care, curiosity, and showing up both ways. Stop giving too much where there is no return. You are a person, not a service." There you go. And last but not least, let's hear what's going on with the Sabres here. And, they're in the playoffs now. So in Buffalo, in their exit meeting last season, Sabres coach Lindy Ruff challenged Beck Ballantyre to convert more of the offensive opportunities his role as a heavy presence on the fourth line offered him. Ruff told the 6'3", 209-pound Ballantyre that he had about 7 or 8 opportunities that were like, "Hey, you really need to execute that." Showcasing subtle finish around the end net or putting a softer touch on a pass would help him finish more of those chances. So Ballantyre, who began Monday's game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, have scored a career-high 7 goals in 76 outings this season, focused last summer on honing those skills and developing confidence. At the same time, he did not want to lose his identity as the Sabres' most physical presence. "I think I battled with it for a little bit," he said. There were times where I was probably trying to make plays that got me away from the ability to forecheck and things like that through the preseason and training camp.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes